Delta. My guide led me back to the main gallery and up a short flight of steps, where we found, ranged along the back wall, a series of broken figures. "These are the pediment sculptures," my guide said, or some of them at least. They were removed from above the east entrance to the temple. I asked which of the figures most caught their eye, and they took me, without hesitation, to the sculpture furthest to our right. It was a horse's head, life-size, mounted on a plinth, and that was it. So weird to see it like that, we thought. A three-dimensional horse's head, chopped off neatly at the neck, just below his jaw, and balanced so precarious on the stump. For just a head, he seems so alive, my guide said. His eyes are wide open and perfectly round. They look like they're straining, almost popping out from the sockets. I took a step back to get a better view. "The muscles in his cheeks," I said. "They're taut, and his mouth's open, as if he's gasping, like he's at the end of a very long journey." "Yes, he looks almost desperate," my guide said. "The veins standing out on his face, the bulging eyes. The sculptor has really captured him, a candid snapshot, not flattering at all, this poor old horse. Of all the sculptures we've seen today, of all the ones we weren't allowed to handle, this is the one I want to touch, just to give him a hug, stroke his little nose." He looked shattered, we agreed. And it was interesting too, he said, how the body language of the animals here, the bulls on the frieze, for example, or this horse, they were easier to read than the human figures or the gods, with their blank expressions, the serene countenance, divinely impassive. It was a relief, to be honest, to have such a feeling of empathy for that big, horsey face. For some time I'd been aware of a dark shape hovering near us as we spoke, not too close, a few steps behind, as if they were waiting for us to finish. I turned towards the shape to ask if they wanted to stand next to us, but before I could, the stranger chipped in. "I agree," they said. "He looks completely exhausted." They had a low-toned voice, their accent not British, if I had to say, difficult to place. "It's a shame," I said. "We just have a bit of him here, this head, a kind of battle trophy, and his body lost or destroyed somewhere along the way." "Ah," the stranger said, "there was never any body. This horse is complete, in fact, as we see him here. He's part of the pediment scene, this tired horse tucked away in the corner. Imagine," the stranger said, "we're standing before the entrance to the temple, and we look up to see this line of sculptures high above us, as if on a stage. We see Athena in the middle, emerging from Zeus's head, Dionysus to one side, and all these other gods and nymphs around them. The whole scene framed by the sloping sides of the temple's roof. But where the sloping roof meets the outer walls, there are these awkward corners, tight angles where no sculpture seemed easily to fit. But instead of leaving them empty, the artists created a narrative to fit those awkward corners, and this horse's head, nestled in the right-hand corner of the pediment, the sloping roof passing diagonally just above his head, this exhausted face is what they hit upon. Because actually the pediment is more like a cinema screen than a stage. This horse was harnessed to a chariot driven by Selene, goddess of the moon, who was visible on the pediment to the left of the horse's head, and she and her chariot are inclining down to the right, like a plane coming into land. So, in other words, She was in the process of disappearing from the frame, down below the pediment and out of shot. That's why we only see the horse's head peeking just above the frame, because his body, which we can't see, which no one ever saw, not now, not then, the invisible body of this horse is out of shot below the pediment. And that's not all. The stranger took a few steps to the side, then turned again to face us. On the other end of the pediment, to your left as we're standing now, nestled in the other awkward corner, there was its mirror image, another horse, another chariot, but this time they're rising up, piloted by the sun god Helios, and so this pairing was a metaphor for dawn, the sun rising on the left, and here on the right, the moon dipping down below the horizon, below the frame created by the pediment. And all this was happening 12 meters above the ground, this whole cinematic scene high above the heads of whoever was visiting the temple. And it was in glorious technicolor too, don't forget, because the whole scene would have been painted, all of the figures dazzlingly vibrant, a riot of colors, almost gaudy in its execution. They were painted? I said. I thought they were just bare marble, like we see them here. No, they were definitely painted. In fact, all Greek sculpture was, the stranger said, a note of triumph in their voice. All the sculptures on this temple, the people in the frieze, the fearsome centaurs there, and here on the pediment, all the gods, Athena, Zeus, wearing brightly coloured clothes, their hair painted, skin tones painted, their eyes painted. But over time, the colours faded, of course, and disappeared. It's hard to believe, I said, in this gallery, all the blank marble, the pale faces, the sandy walls. Yes, the stranger said. In this space it's not easy to imagine Helios's golden chariot rising with the dawn, the sky behind him washed in pinks and blues, and down here, by the moon, Selene's silver chariot submerged in glossy night. It was the theatre of it all, the stranger said, the performance of it, how much like cinema it was, these sculptures moving in and out of view, the pediment teeming with motion, a triangular window to another world, and these glorious beings emerging from the building, rising out of the marble, descending below the horizon, and all of it inspired by the beating of drums, the tooting of pipes, the invocations of the poets, and the tramp of feet sounding before the temple. The whole thing resonant and alive, this incredible scene. That's why people love it, why we're so proud, the low-toned stranger said. This temple, this pediment, and this horse's head, just imagine how it was. The stranger looked away, and we followed his gaze out to the muted gallery, to the blank walls, to the dark shapes flitting past us. I grew up in Athens, they said, a small smile rounding their voice. I grew up with the temple in sight on the hill, and every day as I walked to school, I'd look up and see it between tall apartment blocks, the temple up on the hill, its empty pediment, the whole thing ruined, pillaged, half destroyed. But I loved it. I love it still. That ruined view, I find it romantic somehow. The stranger paused. I felt them step closer to the plinth, and so I gestured forward with my cane, towards the barrier, finding it with a clang like bronze. I've been in London for a decade now, the stranger said, their voice quieter, more pensive than before. I notice I'm embracing certain things. There's a willingness to accept, to integrate, get in line, don't make a fuss. But being in this gallery, I feel I see again the pieces of the puzzle, these ones here, and my own. And yes, I remember that in Athens, growing up, we spoke a lot about what happened.